You are about to watch an interview with one of the candidates for the deputy leadership of the Green Party of England and Wales. Today, I interviewed Alex Mace, who's one of the 9 candidates in the running. Now, before we get there, I've got an apology to make. At the start of this interview, I was having some issues with my microphone. When we started recording, I thought they'd been fixed, but clearly, as you'll see, they hadn't. The good news is my backup mic was working. The bad news is that microphone is trash. Therefore, the audio quality you're about to hear is considerably lower than we'd have liked. I apologise again for this, but I hope you still enjoy the interview. In the meantime, before we get going, make sure you scroll down right now and hit subscribe.
I'm absolutely delighted today to be joined by one of the 9 candidates for the deputy leadership of the Green Party of England and Wales, Alex Mace. Alex, how are you doing today?
I'm good, thank you. I'm glad that the latest heat wave is over, and I've had a busy week of council meetings this week with the committee meetings on Tuesday and Wednesday. So yeah, on the down run to the weekend now.
Well, it's 28 degrees here, so that doesn't sound like the end of a heat wave to me, but glad to hear it's slightly cooler where you are. I'm going to kick things off with hopefully a relatively straightforward question for you, which is just why do you think that you are the person who is best placed to be the next deputy leader of the Green Party?
That's a good question. I mean, in the end, it'll be up to the members of the party to decide who's the best person. And the reason I am standing is when I was looking at the leadership contenders, so Ellie and Adrian and Zach, people can ask me who I was going to choose, and I will be fair and say that at least at that point when I was thinking about it, I wasn't sure because there's things I like about both candidates. And with Ellie and Adrian, I think the downside for them is that they both represent rural constituencies, Tory-facing rural constituencies, and Zach, on the other hand, I think represents obviously urban London and a very different demographic. And I was concerned that there wasn't kind of representative for a smaller city like Worcester in there, so that's kind of why I stood. In terms of why I think I'd be good at it, I think. As a co-leader in Worcester, and I've run our campaigns for the last few years, and we've been very successful in Worcester. We've won the popular vote for 3 years running now. In the county elections we've just had in May, we returned more councillors than any other party in Worcester, and I think that's built on target to win, and I think that's kind of the thing we need to double down on going forward. So it was to give I stood to give an alternative viewpoint on the leadership team, and because I think I bring the experience for electoral success, which is what we need to deliver going forward.
Thank you for that. I wanted to ask you now what it is that you want to change about the Green Party.
So I think the main thing we need to change is the scale that we're able to deliver for effective campaigns. I mean, we've got 800 councillors now, which is an extremely good number, and we've grown an awful lot. I think just here in Worcestershire, for an example, I think we're quite well advanced in Worcester, but in our neighbouring district in Wychavon, there's not many Greens there at all, and we haven't. What I feel like we're missing is the strength and support from the central party to get started in more areas that we can do well in, because there are loads of areas around the country. This is where Reform's doing really well. That people are very disengaged with politics. So I think what we need to do more of is getting parties started, getting them hooked up with activists and training and support to get them doing that. Because it is hard work to implement target to win. And we, similar to questions I get about how do we get more activists involved, if we're going to sit and wait for people to turn up and say, I want to be a Green Party councillor, we're going to make very slow progress. We need to, get in all places across the country, especially in the north, and get parties going up there. So, that's the main thing I think I would change.
So the context of this deputy leadership election is that last year in the general election, the Greens went from 1 to 4 seats. It's best ever general election results. There's now more MPs in Parliament than there ever have been before. The next general election is going to take place at some point over the next 4 years. How many parliamentary seats do you think the Green Party should be targeting at that election?
Oh, that's the $64 million question. So I think it can be a very high number. I mean, where I am in Worcester, in the last general election, we finished fourth on 10.1% of the vote, which is our best ever result. I think our previous result had been like 4.1% in 2015. And I know that we have in London something like 40 seats where we finished second to Labour. And it's not just those 40 that we could potentially win. We could also win in places like Worcester, because we know, well, my own experience in Worcester is most of the other parties just aren't bothering or don't campaign year round. And we can absolutely win here. And if we can win here after finishing fourth at 10%, and I know Ellie finished fourth with 9% in the previous general election, the sky's almost the limit. And I think that if you look at a party like the Liberal Democrats, their vote share went down in the general election this time, but they've delivered the most seats they've ever had. And I don't think that was entirely down to Ed Davey falling off a windsurfing thing, or falling off a water slide and all that kind of stuff. I think it's because it's effective local organising. So the more councillors we can deliver, the more MPs we can get. And absolutely, I've heard Ellie and Adrian saying that we can hold the balance of power in Parliament, and that's something we did locally on Worcester City Council really effectively, and we're the second biggest party, and I think we can do the same in Parliament. So I'm not sure what the number is, but if we can get to 20, 30, 40, that would be an excellent result. But it's all about, we're going to need a lot of fundraising, a lot of infrastructure putting in place before we get to that. And so there's a huge amount of work to do, but the sky's the limit, I guess.
So that sort of dovetails with what I wanted to ask you next. So, you're talking there about potentially winning dozens of seats at the next general election. Now, the party's current electoral strategy when it comes to general elections is to heavily target a very small number of seats and to invest lots of money, resources. By resources, I of course mean activists, and to throw the kitchen sink at a small number of seats that the party theoretically thinks it can win. Now, obviously, the more seats that are on that target list, the more challenging it becomes to do that, because you eventually start spreading your activist base thin, and it costs more money. So, how do you think the Green Party can scale up its operations to achieve that level of success you're talking about?
Well, that's certainly a good question. I think some of the processes that we're going through at the moment with the Path to Parliament programme and picking up lots of development constituencies and giving them the support to find good candidates, select good candidates, is a good approach. It can't be a central command and control system. I know when the Labour Party were looking at their candidates for Worcester, we had essentially a fashion show of outside candidates coming in to say they were suddenly cared a lot about Worcester. And I think an approach like Path to Parliament, where we're going to find lots and lots of development constituencies, hopefully, and teams that say they can do it, and then give them the tools to actually go out and find the activists and deliver. Because I don't think we have the resources as a party to do what Labour do, or assume the Tories do, or the resources of reform to have lots of people coming from the outside. We need to find these people locally that care about their communities and are embedded in their communities. So it's all about getting into those people who are active locally already, who care about the environment, and persuade them to get involved in the party. What exactly that looks like, I'm not sure, but I think it has to be built on local activism.
And so there's the question about infrastructure and about what the campaign looks like, and then there's a question about what's the voting, the electoral base, the electoral coalition that the party is seeking to mobilise. So who are the voters that the Greens are seeking to get to vote for them in order to get them over the line in the sort of dozens of constituencies you're talking about?
Yeah.
To what does that electoral coalition look like?
I think it can be. I think the one that I see is extremely broad. And again, looking at our experience in Worcester, I'm a city councillor here in where I live, which was historically a very conservative area and was held by the Conservatives for years and years. And there are lots of Conservative voters, as an example, who their main issue is who's embedded in the community and working, coming and knocking on the door and talking to them and listening to them and working hard for them. And essentially, the party doesn't really matter. And I think that's what other parties have really forgotten. So we took our first seats, which were Conservative. We then started looking at Labour areas, and essentially the same process there. That the Labour Party, at least in Worcester, don't campaign year round. In Liberal Democrat areas, we've campaigned in those, and again, they don't do the year-round campaigning. So we've taken votes off every single party in Worcester, and that's why we now have won the popular vote 3 years running. So I think the thing that people really value is people who come to the door, ask them what their issues are, listen, and then take action on those issues and tell them, and most importantly, go back to them with a newsletter or on the doorstep again or via email and saying, this is what I've done and this is how I've helped solve your problem. And I think that approach, which is like core of Target to Win, essentially works with anyone. So I know that we talk about the 40 seats where we finished second to Labour in the general election, but I think it's a mistake to think that we only want to appeal to Labour voters and win those 40 seats. There are absolutely Conservative voters who who want to vote for the Greens because they care about the environment very highly. And the same is true of Labour supporters and Liberal Democrat supporters. And, first and foremost, we are a party that cares about the environment, as well as all the other things that go along with that come naturally from wanting to deal with the climate emergency. So I think it's a very broad coalition. We need to appeal to everyone, and I think we can appeal to everyone because we are the party that talks to them, that they can trust, and tells them the truth about what's going on.
So I guess the critique of that argument is that is essentially very effective at winning seats on local councils, and has proven to be as such, right? We've seen over the last 10 years the party go from a couple of hundred councillors to now over 900 in administration in dozens of councils across the country. But the criticism of that argument is that it's all well and good to do that at a local election level, where the issues that you're dealing with are fixing potholes, making sure people's bins are collected on time, and so on and so on. It's much more difficult to build a coalition which encompasses a very, very broad section of society when you start talking about, for example, whether or not we should be maintaining nuclear weapons, whether or not we should be introducing rent controls on landlords, whether or not we should be taxing the rich more, whether or not we should be nationalising public services, and so on. And so I wondered if you had any thoughts then, if you think that coalition should be very broad and can be very broad when it comes to parliamentary elections, how you hold it together when the stakes are much higher and you come across a lot more ideological barriers to people voting for the Greens.
Yes, there's a couple of things I would say to that. So number one is, first past the post imposes a very, very high bar on actually being able to win an election. And the absolutely critical thing it takes to win a first past the post election is credibility and people believing that you can win. So even in those 40 seats where we finished second, I haven't looked at what the gap is for them, but if we're miles away from a win, people just don't believe that you can win. And what the local election success brings is that credibility that Greens can win in this area. We know in Worcester that 33% of people can vote Green at the moment. Our electoral strategy that we're talking about for the general election is, in our next local elections, we want to win 50% of the vote. And if we get to 50% locally and do very well across the whole city, that's a very persuasive argument when we're campaigning in the general election to say, look, you're voting Green because you trust us locally. If you vote for us again in the general election, you will get a Green MP, and that credibility is absolutely gold dust to voters, to convince them that you are an alternative that can win. In terms of like policies and nuclear weapons and all that kind of stuff, I mean, the parties like Labour and the Tories, who are likely to form or reform, or who are likely to form the government, get, I think, a lot more scrutiny on their actual policies. Whereas, the big problem that we have in Worcester, and it's true across the country, as we've seen with those 4 Labour MPs that have just had the whip suspended, is that parties of government, and especially parties that use the whip, they can't stand up for their constituents. The idea that I've kept saying locally is that in the next general election, we want to have a representative of Worcester in Parliament, not the government's representative in Worcester. And that, I think, is, and especially as Worcester is quite a famous bellwether seat. We've delivered by 2029, we will have delivered an MP for the government for 50 years in a row. And for 50 years, if there's a government policy that's not positive for the residents of Worcester, like, we've said, had the disability cuts and the winter fuel payments cuts, and we have an ageing population in Worcester, we have plenty of disabled people, that affects people on the doorstep, and people have mentioned that in local elections. There's not anything we can do about it at local elections, but we certainly hear what they're saying. And what, I think people understand that if they have an MP from Labour or the Tories, they do have to toe the line, they do have to have a whip, but the difference with us is that we don't have a whip. So, an MP is free to stand up for their constituents, and we've talked about this locally with we've had councillors who have a differing opinion to the rest of the Green group, and they vote differently in the council chamber. And I think that's grown up politics, that you are representing your constituents, not just towing the party line all the time. And I think there definitely are voters who care about policy. Some people have said on the doorstep to us, like, oh, you want to leave NATO and all that kind of stuff. But the actual thing that I think voters care most about is, will you represent me in Parliament and stand up for me? And in the end, policy kind of falls away from that. It's doing the hard work of doing that representation and standing up for the people that then gets you permission to implement your policies. There definitely are policies that some people will never vote for, but the most people I think are persuadable and really value that local representation, that you are standing up for them. And I think that's the difference between us and any other major party.
So I've got one more question that's about, I guess, electoral strategy before we move on to some other things. And the context in which we're having this conversation is about 10 days, 2 weeks ago now, the former Labour MP, Zara Sultana, sort of publicly announced that there was going to be the formation of a new left-wing party, possibly led by her, Jeremy Corbyn, possibly not, as yet unclear. But nonetheless, it looks like there will be, by the time of the next general election, some form of left of Labour political party set up. How do you think the Greens need to respond to that?
I think we definitely need to keep an eye on it and think about what's going on with that. It's incredibly easy to announce a party and have people defect to it, and then it goes absolutely nowhere. We saw that with Change UK, that I think they came in with big ideas that there was going to be this centre block between Labour and the Tories that would all defect to Change UK, and they'd be able to do something about it. And it went absolutely nowhere, and they didn't get any votes, and it folded very quickly. I think the idea that Jeremy Corbyn himself is going to be the saviour of the left. I mean, I'm not sure how old Jeremy is now, but he's possibly not the person who's going to be going around the country doing big rallies. So we'll have to see how it goes, really. I think we have to, in some ways, focus on what we're doing and to see what happens. If they are able to put together a decent campaigning infrastructure. One of the reasons Reform, I think, has done well is because they have lots of corporate donations from fossil fuel companies and large businesses who definitely want to see them do well. Is the Corbyn Sultana party going to have the resources to do that. You know, we've spent a long time to get to where we are, and I think we have a pretty good electoral machine at this point. We want to build it up to bring more MPs, but let's not kid ourselves that they've got an uphill battle to get to that. So we'll see how it goes, and what happens. But it's something to keep an eye on. But I'm skeptical that in 4 years' time they may still exist. But let's see what happens.
Yeah, so you very clearly gave two examples there of one sort of new party that was a unmitigated disaster in the form of Change UK, and one newer political party which has been very successful in the form of Reform. And it's not yet clear which of those paths, if any, this new party would take. But let's imagine for a moment that it does start to move in the sort of more Reform territory of being a genuine electoral threat. Quite clearly, and we've seen from the limited opinion polling that we've got on this, the Greens and this new party may well be fishing from the same pool of voters. And there is a scenario in which, if this new entity is established and say it stands candidates in 300 parliamentary seats for the next general election, there's a lot of those that the Greens and this new party will be fighting over. So do you think that there is a need to work together with a new outlet if it does appear that it's taking off, or what other response would you have to this new party if it does manage to get some foothold in the country?
I don't think I would rule anything out. I think I've said in previous discussions on this subject that the door's always open to electoral pacts. Obviously, I think we tried an electoral pact for the 2017 general election, but it didn't really help. But if we can come to an agreement that we don't go for each other's targets, and there's a cast iron guarantee of action on the climate emergency, then the conversation's always there to be had. I know from electoral pacts that have been discussed locally, sometimes you can have situations where you come to an agreement, two people leave a meeting thinking there was an agreement, and then very quickly it all falls apart because the understanding was different. So the door's always open, but I'm always slightly skeptical that in the world of politics, especially with first past the post, where everyone's competing for the votes, it can be very difficult to come to acceptable pacts that everyone's on board with.
So I've now got a series of questions which I am going to implore you to give either a yes or no answer to. And I'm going to ask you to do your very best to stick to that if you can. So it's a series of questions that are on policy areas which are sort of thorny issues of debate and discussion within the Green Party at the moment. The first question I wanted to put to you is, should the UK remain a member of NATO?
Yes.
Is overpopulation a significant issue that we need to tackle when it comes to overcoming the climate emergency?
No.
Should HS2 be completed in full?
Yes.
Does nuclear power have a role in a sustainable energy system?
Certainly not. No new nuclear power. Let's keep the ones we've got until they reach the end of their life.
It's a little longer than one word, but I'll let you off the hook. Should the UK rejoin the European Union?
Yes.
Should people who publicly oppose the Green Party's position on trans rights be allowed to remain in the party?
Yes.
And is ecological sustainability possible under capitalism?
No.
So you were extremely disciplined for the most part there, but I wanted to give you a moment. If there are any of those questions that you wanted to give a bit more depth on, you're more than welcome to.
Yeah. So certainly on the trans issue, I mean, I think I was clear in my announcement video that trans men are men and trans women are women, and non-binary identities are valid. Although I didn't say that last bit in the video, but that's what I believe. I think I wouldn't go as far as to say that they're not allowed to be in the Green Party. We're a broad church and things are open to debate. I think the trans discussion can get extremely heated, for a light way of putting it. But everyone should be free to be to live their existence how they think as their true selves. And I think as long as everyone's treated with respect, then we can talk about these things. The very difficult thing is that the conversations tend to end up in, if one side feels like the other isn't listening, or that their identity is being erased, I can understand why that becomes extremely heated. So I would prefer to find a way where everyone understands each other and we are moving forward to deal with the climate emergency, because that's the most important thing. I've said in various places that it doesn't matter what your ism is if we don't have a planet to live on. So in the end, that's the thing we need to concentrate on. I want to have access to all the people who can help with that. But yeah, everyone should be respected and treated reasonably. On NATO, I think that was one of the questions. I think this has come up on the doorstep, because our policy obviously used to be that we wanted to leave NATO, and now it's currently that we've got to stay in. I think while we have an active war of aggression in Europe with Russia invading Ukraine, there's no discussion about it. If Russia was a country that we could negotiate with in good faith, then absolutely we should be ending that war as soon as possible. And being a member of NATO is probably going to prolong the war. But I think history has shown us plenty of times that dictators who are able to just take land that they want, they don't stop at the next border they get to. They will keep going. And continued expansion of Russia and exploitation of fossil fuels, because we have to remember that Russia's regime over 30 years has been largely funded by sales of fossil fuels to Europe. So the real way that we, I think, end the conflict is working together with our allies to quickly decarbonize as quickly as possible, so that not just Europe but no country in the world is dependent on fossil fuels for running their economy. And then we've deprived Russia of their main source of income, and hopefully we can get this all resolved. So it's an extremely difficult situation, but we have to accept that there is a war of aggression, and Putin and Russia would like nothing more than to see members of NATO saying, "Oh, we're going to leave." Which is possibly a slightly unpopular opinion, but that's my position on it.
I had a series of other questions just to finish on, and for both viewers who've watched any of these interviews from past elections, they will know that I tend to try and end these on slightly less serious questions, and hopefully you'll accept that they're less serious. My first of them is that the Green Party's had 5 deputy leaders in its history. Who do you think's been the best?
I mean, it would be. I don't think it would be fair to rate them as the best to worst. I mean, the only one I've ever met is Zach, and he's been to Worcester multiple times, and has been really supportive of us in Worcester. So, he's. I think I've been a member of the party since 2015. So we had Amelia Womack and for a lot of that time, and Shahar Ali and Zach. I think that's all of them. I can't remember.
So also 2015. Yeah. 2 others before that, but I won't quiz you on them.
But like I said, Zach's the one I work most closely with. He's come to launch events here. He's extremely good at working the room and getting people excited. So I'm going to have to say Zach, because he's the one I've dealt with most.
So my next question is slightly cheeky, and I assume that you'll be giving your first preference in this election to yourself. Who will be getting your second preference?
That's a good question. So I'll pick one of each gender. So I think Rachel Millward is extremely good. I've only seen her on clips from Politics South East, wherever it is, and she comes across extremely well on there. So I think she would be an excellent representative for the party. And the other one is probably Frank Adlington Stringer, who we have worked with in Worcester. He was one of our campaign organisers for the elections in May this year. And he's extremely good on social media. He talks extremely well on TV, so I think as member of the leadership team, because in the Green Party, we don't set policy with the leaders. He's an extremely good representative. So I think that both of those would be excellent leaders. But, of other ones, Moth and Ali, I think, comes across very well, and obviously did extremely well with the riots, the far right riots up in Leeds, where he's a councillor, so he's very good. So yeah, probably one of those three would be good.
And so at the start of this conversation, you talked about the leadership election, which is going on at the same time as the deputy leadership election. Who do you want to win that contest?
So I have sent my endorsement through to Ellie and Adrian. So I think, like I said right at the start, I think there are good things, bad things about both tickets. Zach, like I said, we've had him in Worcester. He's extremely good, motivating people. I have two concerns with Zach, which number one is I mentioned about I don't care about isms because we don't have a planet. They don't matter. I have concerns over the idea of eco-populism. Like, I don't think that the media in this country are interested in platforming green voices, and I think the idea that we can get media coverage by aping reform, or not being controversial but being stronger. I think the media in this country is just not interested in platforming that, and I have a worry that it will put people off. We talked about, I think we need to have a broad coalition of voters. I've door knocked in Worcester and in the 2019 general election, and heard repeatedly that people weren't voting for Jeremy Corbyn because of some of the things that I think we would be putting more front and centre if Zach was the leader than if Ellie and Adrian were. And I think Ellie and Adrian, they know what it takes to win general election seats, and that we need to support people to do more of target to win. So that's essentially why I'm backing them, because we know what works, and they will double down on that. Whereas, like I said, I'm not confident that eco-populism is the way forward.
A few final ones to wrap things up. What is your favourite Green Party policy?
What is my favourite Green Party policy? I was trying to dig through because I was signing some pledges for LGBTQIA plus Greens, and they were asking me what was did I agree with policies RR 500 to 539, I think, and it took me a while to actually find the policies. I think probably the wealth tax is the main thing, because it's the big problem we've had over the last 15 years is we don't invest in our public services, and when you don't invest in public services or go through cuts like we've seen, it chokes off growth. I mean, everyone talks about productivity in the UK hasn't gone up for years and years. It's essentially because public services have been cut, and then reduces productivity, and then we cut more, and et cetera, it just goes round and round. So I think we have to be brutally honest and say, look, we need to raise taxes so that we can invest in our infrastructure, and do the green transition that we need. The thing I keep talking about to people is we know we have the solutions to the climate crisis in front of us. We can put solar panels on people's houses. We can put heat pumps in. We can install batteries. These are all small scale things that can be rolled out at large scale to lots of places. And things like the wealth tax are things that we need to do to be able to afford that. I mean, I think it's estimated to raise like 50 billion a year. It's a very back of the fag packet calculation, but I think it would cost about 100 billion to put solar panels and batteries on every single house in the UK, and that would generate huge amounts of jobs and employment in this country. We could produce those solar panels and batteries in this country. If we switch over onto that, we don't have fossil fuels being shipped around the world on tankers, because we can generate all of our energy locally. So it's that raising money from the people who have the broader shoulders that I think is my favourite policy, because it allows us to invest in the things we need to do to make people's lives better in this country.
So you probably worked out what my next question is, which is what is your least favourite Green Party policy?
So I've got this is a really prosaic one, but we've been and apologies to another interview where I also said this was my least favourite policy. So we've been dinged locally because the Green parties have a policy statement apparently that horses are a sustainable form of transport, which I don't really have a problem with that policy, but it's like I prefer if it wasn't on the docket so that we didn't get people locally going, well, I don't want to vote for the Greens because they think horses are a sustainable form of transport, which, I mean, I guess they are. It runs on carrots, or I've never held a horse or never had a horse, so I don't know if you can just feed them carrots, but you can run them on obviously food you can grow, etc. And that one always sticks with me. Although there is locally in Worcester, there is somebody who I've seen around with a horse and cart, and every time I see them, I do think, oh, there's a sustainable form of transport. But yeah, maybe I'll take that one off the books.
I didn't know that was in the Green Party policy book, so you just revealed to the other people, which is a revelation, I'm sure, to many. My last question for you is: who in the Green Party inspires you the most?
So I would say my predecessor in this seat that I currently hold on the City Council now, which is Marjorie Bissett. So she she retired in 2023. Not 2023, sorry, she retired. I was elected in 2024. She retired in 2024. And Marjorie, the story that's told is that she was involved. She stood for Parliament in Reading before she moved to Worcester. And she came into Worcester and got involved with the local Green Party and basically came into the room and was like, right, you lot need organising. And I think Marjorie is the one who is largely responsible for our success in Worcester. She's extremely particular about making sure we're dealing with our data in the correct way, that we are going out and doing our door knocking, and all of the rest of the campaigning. She's very, very particular about our newsletters, using the correct grammar and following the house style. And she's been absolutely invaluable to us. And it culminated with she became in 2023 the joint leader of Worcester City Council with Lynn Denham from the Labour Party, and that was the first time in history that we'd ever had a woman be the leader of Worcester City Council, which seems kind of remarkable that we got to 2023 before we'd had a woman being the leader of the council. But essentially through sheer force of will, Marjorie made it happen, and she became the joint leader. And people say to me on the doorstep, because I'm the councillor where she used to be the councillor, either where's Marjorie or are you the new Marjorie? And she's quite a short, quiet woman, but she's there's a core of steel in there that inspires me every day that I need to do the best job I can, because I've got a huge pair of shoes to live up to.
Sure, everyone will be pleased to have learned about Marjorie. Alex, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for joining me today.
You're very welcome. Thank you very much for the chat. It's been very interesting.
Thank you for watching that interview with Alex Mace, one of the 9 candidates standing for the deputy leadership of the Green Party of England and Wales. Apologies again for the issues with the microphone. I hope it wasn't too bad for you in the end. If you enjoyed the interview, make sure you hit the like button, and to keep up with everything Bright Green is doing, hit subscribe.